Hello there and welcome back to Ra's Night Squeeze the Quo. It is Saturday night, September, let me double check, 16th. It's right there on my computer. September 16th, 2023, Saturday night, 8:17 p.m. or 2017. I am currently drinking a dirty martini, straight up Belvedere. I'm getting a little bougie. Saturday night was a rough week. And I have some blue cheese stuffed olives. So my last video, it was long. I did a lot of talking, did little tangents, but you know what? Some of those things need to be said. And I didn't edit those. I just went ahead and just dropped it because I really work on trying to be my authentic self, and flaws and all. I flub things up. Do I articulate to the fullest degree all the time? No, I don't. But I like to believe my intentions are always in a true, caring, thoughtful, kind, justice, faith. That is how I work on living in my life, which is why I felt the way I felt in that last video. So I just want to do a quick drop. I know I'm going to do the rest of November. It is the 27th, 28th, and 29th to stop all of November to get into December, leading up to December 9th of the Ann Burgess, Gary Brucato interview on Surviving the Survivor, which happened to come out the day after the LE dropped the information about Hyundai Elantra 2011-2013. And I am showing the dynamic between Steve and the FBI. But I would like to remind, which I did in my last video, that it was the Chapins that they were the ones that alerted the public that this happened. And the reason why they alerted the public was because of the amount of insane rumors that were going on, saying that it was some crazy love triangle, that there was drugs involved, and they wanted to say something to kind of, because if people don't know, that's when the rumors start. Which the video that I'm going to drop after this of the 27th, 28th, and 29th, you're going to hear former FBI agents say that it's important for LE to let the public know what is going on, to the point where you don't jeopardize your investigation, but you have to say something. You have to let people know that they're safe. You can't just say, trust us. That doesn't fly anymore, especially after George Floyd. And that all went on. So this is kind of a preview into part 2B. And I'm doing a quick little paper. And as you see, I have video footage that's just kind of going on with the pictures. And what I'm learning with looking into the part 2 of this is not only the dynamic between Steve G and the media and the FBI, is the dynamic of Ethan. Ethan's in a fraternity. Ethan rushed last year. So this is the second year of him being a member of Sigma Chi. I believe I'm saying that right, Sigma Chi. Not Sigma Chi, but Chai, like chai tea latte. And the other 3 victims were no longer in a sorority. They were in a sorority at one point, but no longer in it. But Ethan was, and he was slain. Dylan and Bethany were in a sorority, and they were not. Even though, allegedly, in the affidavit, Dylan saw the perpetrator on a couple different occasions. She saw him enough to know that he was 5'10" and had bushy eyebrows, clad in black. Did she really say those things? My gut tells me no. She's a college student. I don't think she's using that terminology unless she comes from a family, a military background, a family that has a military background, or a family that has a police officer background. But I find that odd that a 20-year-old will use that terminology. So the specific paper that I want to drop and bring out is about fraternity and hazing and the typology of it. I went ahead and I highlighted specific parts that I feel it illuminates and it has some insight about fraternity life. And if anyone is listening to this who is part of a fraternity, please let me know. My email's on there. It's this is Roz with Z's. This is Roz at gmail.com. It's pretty easy to remember. All with Z's. This is Roz at gmail.com. Let me know if this research paper, is close or not even close. But what I find with research papers, they tend to be closer to the truth than not the truth. Especially the ones that say on there, we have limitations, and please inquire further using this paper. Tell us where we're wrong or tell us where we're right, and then expand on it. All right, let's get to it. And I wanted to do this on the night of the 48 hours. I wanted to do this because I'm not going to watch that tonight. I'll wait until a different night. But I would like to see what they're saying and if the fraternity sorority life is even brought into the picture. Because there's one commonality between all those victims. They were in Greek life or are currently in Greek life. They were in an off-campus sorority home. So there is one aspect that they all share, Greek life. So here it is, hazing typologies, those who criminally haze and those who receive criminal hazing. It is associated with victims and offenders, and it was published May 19th, 2008. So it's older. Will this be old hat? Please let me know in the comments. I have a feeling it's not. Sometimes the older ones are spot on. Just like someone mentioned on, if you ever watch Truth and Transparency, if you don't watch it, please go watch it. But they had made a comment with Bella that the earlier drop of information with any type of a crime, especially like this, when it's said in the beginning, what is said in the beginning is the truth. And then after time goes on, that's when the PR people come in. You can't say this. We got to control the narrative, all that stuff. So sometimes the oldies are goodies. But not all oldies are goodies. Sometimes oldies are old hat, and they need to be left alone. Move on, grow, expand, modernize. So they're highlighted 2008, hazing typologies. And this is from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, which, okay. So the abstract. This study addresses the reality of criminal hazing by college sororities and fraternities in terms of offenders and victims. And they reviewed 3 years of archived data. The intro. Fraternities and sorority hazing is directly responsible for numerous physical injuries and mental trauma which have a lasting impact on initiates. The fact that hazing is criminalized in most states within the United States. One issue with respect to the criminalization of hazing is that most states do not approach it in the same way. There is a lack of uniformity from state to state. In many states, it is not only a crime to engage in hazing, but it is also a crime to know of hazing and not report it. And this I've noticed when I research these papers, these research papers, the whole bystander that has been a way of trying to rectify this type of behavior, to not be a bystander, to voice and say something, stand up and say something. Another intangible impact is that hazing promotes a learned behavior, and that hazing victims are most likely to initiate new members in the same way when they are in a position of power. Literature review. Hazing has been a problematic issue for decades now, and this is 2008. So they're saying that it's been a problem for decades now, and now we are in 2023. Moscow, Idaho. 4. Could this be a interpersonal Greek life hazing type incident? Homicide. Could it? And as I've said in my other videos, I will be using explicit language. You be your own judge. I bring out these papers. I bring in the news, and you formulate your own opinion. You decide for yourself. You are in charge of your own brain, your thoughts, and your feelings. You are in charge of those. Hazing has been a problematic issue for decades now. It is most commonly practiced in tight-knit groups, such as fraternities and sororities. What caught my attention about this is that tight-knit expression. What did Fry say in the first press conference? This is a tight-knit community. When I hear tight-knit community, I hear there is a order, a hierarchical order. There is a history. There are levels, and there is a quiet understanding. There is a secret. There is a social order that goes on, like a hierarchy, that specific people control within that tight-knit community. As I mentioned in my other video, I grew up in a tight-knit community, a very small town. So I see these aspects with Moscow, Idaho. As I mentioned, I live in New York State. Go Bills. And even though a lot of people like to believe that New York State is a bleeding heart state and it's very liberal, that's what the city, parts of the city, not even all of the city, but parts of the city. But outside of New York State, it is very red. It's not bleeding heart, it is bleeding red. And it is very conservative, which is why my channel is Roz Knight Squeeze the Quo. Moving forward. Many have suffered from traumatic injuries, including irreversible intracranial damage, blunt intra-abdominal organ damage, third-degree burns, heat stroke, suffocation, aspiration, sexual assault, and death. And I find this part interesting. The first documented college fraternity established in 1825 at Union College was known as the Kappa Alpha Society. Soon after, Delta Chi and Sigma Chi emerged, followed by several college sorority organizations. Fraternities do not tell their pledges that they are going to be hazed, beaten, or abused, but pledges anticipate some degree of abuse during Hell Week. Initiation rites are framed as a tradition involving discipline that is character building and reveals loyalty and commitment. that kind of sounds like, to me, a interpersonal, violent type situation. Advocates of hazing assert that hazing creates a sense of unity and love for organization despite the repercussions. Many hazing activities have now gone underground to avoid penalties. When I initially read this, I thought to myself, is that what Ethan's mom may have been referring to as 2 a.m. is a dark time? It's a dark hour. Is that when they do their underground activities? So this is how they got their information with their study. They do an in-group session, and then they do a online, which is 2008. So I kind of chuckle every time I hear that. It's 2008 and they did an online study. But it was really not that long ago. In 2008, I believe I mentioned this in my last video about email, how I totally avoided that. And that was around that time. But you know what? It can be used for important research as well. Not so much for email, but for research. I totally would be on board with that. And they asked a various number of questions about Haze within the fraternity and sororities, and to try to identify some of the motivation and or facts about people who are hazed. And they definitely get their hypothesis and how they were logically connected to primary questions, and that they promoted thought or research possibilities. So like, why does the fraternity and sorority hazing occur? Should fraternity and sorority hazing continue? And if so, under what circumstances? The appropriateness of these 4 central research questions were clear in that they informed the 2 hypotheses about potential hazing typologies that could be identified, in order to make such a finding more clear. This study used primary and secondary data in order to answer the 4 central research questions. And this is about the participants. There were 17 in the in-person focus group that lasted about 90 minutes. And this is about the in-person focus group. The overall responses indicated that hazing constitutes physical and mental abuse. However, there was no clarity as to what this specifically meant. The participants also indicated that when initiates have to meet outside of officially planned times, this is when physical hazing mostly occurs. So let's say that Sigma Chi is involved with this. And if you know anything about this case, Sigma Chi has a straight shot to that house. And I've heard people saying, other content creators and TikToks, how certain bedrooms in Sigma Chi can see straight over to 1122 King Road. And I want to say it was Truth and Transparency. Please go see her channel. It's amazing. That one of those noise complaints that was on either 816, maybe not 816, but maybe 91 or 92 and into 92, that it was a sorority around that area that called in the noise complaint, which gives you insight about how Greek Row felt about that off-campus sorority home. And once that sorority sister got called out about it, her brother stepped in and said, it wasn't her, it was me. And I didn't look in to see if he's a member of Sigma Chi. If he is, that would be insightful. Participants indicated that anything done against someone's will constitutes hazing. Hazing by choice, such as volunteer, they are completing what the participants refer to as work. entails physically or mentally, does not constitute actual hazing, and demonstrates that respect for the founders and purposes of the organization. If you recall with the Surviving the Survivor with Anne and Gary, if I met those two out in public, I would be besides myself. But like he said, it's gotten to the point where this is like this new type of evil that's within our society that allows certain crimes to happen that's become socially acceptable. And with those people, it's gotten to the point that they have, and people in general as well, there's other organizations that they entwine themselves so much into these organizations that if you fault it or alter it, then they almost break. Like they can't handle that because they don't have a personal self. Their self is a fraternity, a church group, a politician, of what you may be, some type of an organization. And just that respect for the founders. The in-person participants were also asked why members of a fraternity or sorority might haze, and it's for respect for the fraternity or sorority traditions, and that hazing demonstrates the seriousness of organizational values, therefore helping to foster an appreciation of such values. Several other participants indicated that some members bring anger and frustration from realities outside of the fraternity or sorority to the initiation process, and Haze initiates in order to release that frustration. And then it talks about how there is an internal struggle toward a finish line, and that they feel as though hazing should be a normal part of the initiation process. And they need to satisfy whatever the requirement is to complete the process. Many of the participants indicated initiates endure hazing to be considered legitimate. Members of the organization and imply that to not be hazed is tantamount to not being worthy of full membership. That more hazing equals more respect. That, my friends, is the definition of abuse. That is a interpersonal violent relationship. That is a dynamic about power and control and a manipulation. Many of the participants indicated, okay, just went through that. Finally, there was also the aspect of legacies, often applying pressure to initiates. I hope I'm saying that right. The reality of legacies is important in that if someone's relative, a parent or an uncle, for example, is already a member of that organization, there is an enormous pressure on them to become a member of the same organization. So this makes me wonder if some of the police officers, ISP, are part of Sigma Chi or were part of a sorority. Also, the president of the University of Idaho grew up in 1122 King Road, and he is now the president of the university. So talk about close, tight-knit community. I would be interested to know how many of those Sigma Chi members are also quote-unquote townies, or their family members were Sigma Chi at a different chapter in a different state or a university. Because it seems like it's a very important aspect to be a fraternity member at Sigma Chi, or any. But as we just learned, it's one of the very first fraternities. So I'm sure they hold that at a high esteem. The overall majority of the respondents indicated that they believe that hazing is appropriate if it is not life-threatening. Well, how are they supposed to know that? They are young individuals. They're basically still, they are very young adults, not even adults. They are 20 and 21. That is young to start making decisions like that. You will have to have some type of a emotional intelligence, which I don't believe many 20 and 21-year-olds do. The ones that I do, I want to say, are Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Zaina. They had an emotional maturity about them, the way they carry themselves, the way they're comfortable in their skin, the way Ethan sings in front of everyone, his karaoke. That is someone who is comfortable in his own skin. And I'm sure he's a charming individual. They all seem charming just by looking at them. You can tell. As I said, I'm a cusper. I've been around a little while. And you can look at people and how they hold themselves and what they wear. What type of person they are. I mean, I could be wrong in some aspects. Were they perfect? No. But I could be wrong in some aspects. But I want to say that the country and international, it's gone international. So these four have hit a note with a lot of people around the world, which says something. So on the online focus group, physical and mental endurance rather than community service is terms of hard work. It seems that the notion of what is appropriate to learn about the organization focuses on the physical and mental aspects of hazing to learn organizational values rather than using the values for community service, that sounds to me like that's the reason why they started the fraternity in the first place. And it's kind of gone off kilter many, many moons ago. Online focus groups. So the participants of the online focus group were asked a series of questions. Responses were then coded for analyzing. The problem with the use of the term bullying, which was indicated by a large number of the participants, is that there was no indication by any participants as to whether this was more mental or physical. Because you know why? They're 20 and 21. They're not able to differentiate. They're not able to articulate that yet. Some more than others, but as a whole, are not able to. And now they have to prove their worth to the founders. With respect to whether or not hazing is a legal activity, online participants indicated, just like the in-person focus group, that a threshold exists with respect to hazing. These participants indicated that hazing helps to form a bond among the initiates, teaches them respect, and instills a notion of teamwork. That sounds like trauma bonding to me, folks. Trauma bonding. Could this be why the FBI is involved? Just a thought. I could be way off. It was indicated by several participants that people often haze because they have self-esteem problems and therefore want to make themselves feel more important by having control over others. Online focus group participants were also asked about why initiates endure hazing. And they want to be able to fit in. That being a member of the organization is so important to them that they are willing to undergo many different tests to show their willingness to belong. Because someone has a belief about membership does not necessarily mean that they have researched the realities enough to make a final determination. They often base their beliefs about membership on stereotypes. So on to whether to continue hazing, 2/3 of online focus group participants indicated that hazing is appropriate as long as it does not cross a fine line, a term not made clear, because they don't know. They say the words, but they don't know, which I've said before in my other video. You can talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk. In this case, they're talking the talk and they're walking into it without understanding the talk, which is just equally as dangerous and equally as bad, in my opinion. I don't know if I said this at the beginning. I've been drinking my martini. My language will be explicit. Use your own judgment. Use your own brain. I think I've said that before. And you are in control of your thoughts and your feelings. So archive discussion board participants. And as to what constitutes hazing, the archived discussion board indicated that the issue is generally understood. However, there was no discussion of a specific definition, nor was the difference between physical and mental hazing noted. See, this is why I don't like this whole world when I was in college, because I played sports because there's clear, defined rules. Travel, out of bounds, 3-point, high sticking. There are clear, and there's always going to be some wiggle room when you have the officials, but we all know what the rules are. Here they don't know the rules or the regulations. They're aware of it, but they just don't know. There's a fine line. It's always in a gray area, which is what Gary said. When you're constantly living in this gray area. Oh my gosh. I just came to me right now. When you're always in this gray area, it becomes dangerous. You have to live, like, not everything is black and white, and there's a gray area. But if you're always in the gray area, that is equally as dangerous as thinking always in black and white. Many people engage in hazing indicate that pledges should earn membership. Yikes. One aspect of the archive discussion board participants was the high level of responses focused on members of fraternities or sororities with self-esteem problems. Fools with respect to the initiation process, it was suggested that these members cause more harm to the fraternity or sorority by engaging in hazing because they are exposing these organizations to potential lawsuits and damaged reputations. Regarding whether or not hazing should continue, 1/3 of the responses indicated that hazing should continue. It is appropriate as long as it does not cross a fine line, a term again not defined. Efforts to stop hazing actually bring more attention to the fraternities and sororities. In their opinion, this may cause more problems for people trying to join. That explicitly made mention of how efforts to specifically address hazing and call attention to its existence might take focus away from the value of the organization and hurt its reputation. 2/3 of the respondents indicating hazing should not continue, and that they believe hazing diverts efforts and attention away from the real fraternal work engaged in by these organizations within the community. Which I'm sure, or I hope, that was the initial rationale of having these fraternities for community service, but part of me feels like that's not true. Because here we are. Did it take that many years to escalate up to 2008 from what they say, 18 something? Let's go back. Yeah, 1825. There you go. And then after that, so let's say the 1900s, and now it's 2008. So did it just always has been that way, and it just escalated to the point in 2008 that it's just coming out more and more and more? And now we're here in 2023, and this might be a fraternity type situation that it's for students. Is it possible? Yes. Could it be true? Maybe. So let me find my spot. Okay, and that's where we were. So the data analysis, we'll go past that. Discussion. The first typology indicated by the participants in all three groups was that of teacher, provider of knowledge about the fraternity or sorority, and feels the need and the authority to use whatever tools are at their disposal to access the knowledge of initiates. Teacher, in many cases, might violate what rules exist with respect to initiating members into these organizations. The second one is the fool. That involves a person who does not use common sense when thinking of their position of power or influence over the new initiates. Some type of self-esteem problem or brings behavior influenced by drugs. Okay, this person is often someone who either has some type of self-esteem problem or brings behavior influenced by drugs or alcohol to the process. This can result in a great deal of physical hazing abuses. Three typologies of people who endure or receive hazing were identified. The legitimation seekers, legacy seekers, and tunnelite lookers. The legitimation seeker describes initiates who are searching for either some sense of belonging within the university setting or are attached to a belief of what fraternity or so they're not grounded whatsoever. That's what that sounds like. The respondents repeatedly indicate that they tend to focus on how they are perceived by others. This translates to them seeking to choosing to endure hazing in order to be considered real members of organization. So that person does not have a healthy sense of self. They are looking for outside influences to make them feel worthy. So that is that's problematic big time. They may not be knowledgeable about the realities of becoming a member and therefore might be willing to go far beyond what they are comfortable with in order to make themselves feel legitimate. And you know what? You probably have some fraternity members that see that and abuse that as well. They are often dealing with people questioning not only whether someone is a member, but what type of a member they are. So they're constantly digging and comparing. People who went through a lot to join the organization versus others who might have had an initiation which was not as strenuous. So when I read this, I thought of, what if Ethan did not get a strong hazing compared to what others thought he should have had because they endured it? I bet you those fraternity brothers are constantly comparing who did this and what did this. And Ethan, because in the videos I've seen, he seems to be charming. And his family obviously loves him very much because they came to the public first, which they care about them. They care about their family. And they didn't care about the repercussions of doing that, because they were the ones that came out first, not Steve G. They did. And in the interview, which I cannot watch because it breaks my heart just looking at them, she had said that they had just saw him in Parents Week, which was the week prior, and they literally sit there and they said, we did it. We made beautiful humans. We made strong, character-building humans. Well, and we did it right. And it looks like they might have done it a little too right because other parents have not developed the characterizations within their children. So Ethan, he looks very comfortable in his skin. And he's charming and he's pretty athletic and he's got a hot girlfriend and he stays at her house off campus. I could see a lot of brothers being jealous of that. Just saying, I was 20 once too, and 21 once as well. And you hear it and you see it. It's not something new. That's not something that's old hat. That is just basic human behavior on a campus, especially after COVID. They're always questioning not only whether someone is a member, but what type of member they are. people who went through a lot to join the organization versus others who might have had initiations which were not as strenuous. People skating through the process. These individuals are often talked about behind their backs as not being as real as other members. See this type of dynamic that you form within these fraternities builds an unhealthy relationship between all of them. This leads the seekers to seek to do whatever is necessary to make sure that they are not placed in this lesser category. Problem with this logic is that most initiants have no idea what members actually went through and make the presumption that the process is uniform. See, that's the secrecy. That's the secrecy element. So that almost has me thinking that the reason why LE and ISP have been so secret is because and if they're part of fraternity, and yes, the police have been known to be their own type of fraternity, that's how they operate. And we see how it creates a very distrust and unjust throughout. Legacy seekers is described as someone desiring to belong to the same organization as someone close to them, usually a relative. This title, being a legacy, carries a level of status. However, respondents indicate that it often involves initiates feeling pressure from loved ones to do whatever is necessary to belong to these organizations. I keep bringing him up, Gary. That level of pressure, he said. That level of pressure. It makes me think he's thinking about this, or he is insinuating this. You have to kind of almost read between the lines. Legacies are often not explicitly told that they need to do whatever is necessary to join these organizations by their loved ones. Respondents noted that legacy seekers perceive they need to do whatever is necessary to belong and are often willing to go beyond what is comfortable for them in order to join. Now, that's an unhealthy dynamic. Enduring a difficult initiation process is often considered something of a bragging right to members of fraternities. I mean, that's abusive. That's abusive. The tunnelite looker is a very dangerous category to belong to, according to all. Well, going back to this legacy, which makes me think, could possibly some of the LEISP, other members, higher ranking members of that town, that little small tight-knit town, if any of them are part of the Sigma Chi that's been a long-standing fraternity? Makes you think. Tunnelite looker is a very dangerous category to belong to, according to all three groups, in that the individual feels that they are at the point where they cannot go further, but are motivated to continue enduring hazing with the belief that this last incident might be the last one. So that makes it sound like in their mind, they believe that hazing is always going to keep going on as long as they're in a fraternity. And that type of manipulation and that type of uncertainty is very detrimental. It's unfortunate and dangerous. It can become dangerous when an individual knows they are not comfortable anymore, but make the decision to engage in other activities they are not comfortable with because they believe that they are that much closer. And I have a feeling you would have these teachers be aware of this and other fraternity members and take advantage. Tunnelite lookers often become disillusioned with the initiation process and sometimes with the organization itself because they feel it is not a valid process that they can gauge when it begins and ends. So they don't have the capability to be in that type of dynamic. They don't have that. I don't know if anyone should have these types of capabilities or dynamics to be in these type of fraternities or sororities. I know I didn't. But, and as I was reading, like even athletics have a lot of hazing as well. I played in college only a year, but still and it was my first year, and I never endured in anything like that. That was not there. I've heard of other female sports were like that, but the one that I was in was not. So maybe I just got lucky. Who knows? But it was also back in the 90s. But as we're here talking about this is 2008. This was going on. So I don't know when the athletic aspect, where they became this hazing aspect as well. Conclusion. With undergraduate fraternity and sorority members linking hazing to honoring some aspect of fraternity or sorority tradition, changing this pattern seems unlikely. This research makes clear that society's views about hazing are not seen as credible by many fraternity and sorority members, even though colleges, fraternal organizations, and legislators have made efforts to prohibit hazing. This choice to defy society's stance on hazing is still an issue, and convictions of criminal hazing have not sent the message. Well, you have not done enough criminal hazing, that's why it's not sending the message. Lately, we've been seeing a lot of it, but then again, these sexual crimes, they just finally are now admitting that they happen, and they finally just started admitting that interpersonal domestic violence happens as well. So it's going to take time as long as you are consistent with it. And even though the choice to defy is okay. Oh, that's the end of it. So the choice to defy society's stance on hazing is still an issue, and convictions of criminal hazing have not sent the message. Some members of these organizations often see their own views as more important than those of the organization. The choice to defy society's stance on hazing is still an issue, and convictions for criminal hazing have not sent the message. Some members of these organizations often see their own views as more important than those of their organization. Many members of fraternities and sororities do not condone hazing and understand that such behavior causes harm to the reputation of these organizations and also can result in lawsuits and death. A sad commentary on the focus group participant responses is that no matter their viewpoint, was they did not believe that serious injuries should happen with respect to hazing. However, there was no clear idea within any of the groups as to how to stop this process. Which, how are you going to let them know how to stop the process when they don't have that mental maturity or the emotional maturity to do that? And if you have the older members who are through there and they're still holding that ideal, well, then the younger ones coming in are just going to keep that. It's like the cycle of abuse, it sounds like. So I just wanted to put that out here before I continued with part 2B, which is ending the month of November. And we will be looking at 2 former FBI's viewpoints on this case. And they do use some of the terminology that we have used or we have learned along the way of the papers that I've used. You're going to hear covert and overt that they use, and inclusion as well as intrinsic. So it was interesting to hear them use those terminology after we've been going through those papers and listening to how they use them. And I've had to listen to them a few times to hear what they're trying to say. And I would like to hear your input on this. I think this is a great resource right here on the insight of what it means to be in a fraternity and a sorority. If any of you who are listening are part of either or, please email me or comment. I understand this is kind of a very touchy subject just in general, because it sounds like it's pretty volatile. It's pretty problematic. And I can understand why Maddie and Kaylee and Zaina did not want to be a part of that. They seem like they had so much more going for them, which is part of the reason that's even on here. Some of the people who joined these organizations are looking to find their place in life, and they just go above and beyond. Like, that's not what it's about. And I could see the four of them looking at it as a coming from a place of networking, a place of being a sister or a brother, and more of a deeper meaning other than the hazing aspect. So it makes me think maybe there's a dynamic within themselves, within the fraternity. Some want to get away from the hazing, and some are kind of like, okay, this is above and beyond, this is dumb, this is so stupid, I'm not participating, so on and so forth. So you have that internal conflict between those who want to and those who want to get away from that. And I can totally see that happening within those four. So I wanted to bring that out before I started the rest. I hope you enjoyed this one. I actually enjoyed learning this one. This one was a little bit lighter than the other one, obviously. But I feel like this gave a nice insight of what it means to be a fraternity and sorority. So thank you for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday night. I am going to finish up my dirty martini straight up with my blue cheese olives. Thank you. And I want to give a shout out to my 8 subscribers. I appreciate you. And please like, share, hit the notification button, and we will meet again here on Ra's Night. Squeeze the quote.